Episode 2: The 5 Systems That Actually Make Construction Businesses Profitable. In the early years of our company, things looked good from the outside. Revenue was growing, we were hiring people, we were moving into bigger offices, the phone was ringing. If you looked at the top line numbers, it looked like success. But internally, it didn't always feel that way. Every year felt like a scramble. Cash was tight, decisions were reactive, and no matter how much work we did, the stability we were always chasing just felt out of reach. We weren't failing, but we also weren't building something that felt durable. And that's a strange place to be as a business owner, because from the outside, everyone assumes you're doing great. But inside, you know how fragile everything really is. In the last episode, I talked about how most builders stay small because they scale effort instead of structure. Today, I want to talk about the 5 systems that actually change that for us. Not overnight, not perfectly, but slowly, over time. These 5 areas are what turned our company from a busy operation into a real business. When people hear the word systems, they often think about software, automation, or corporate bureaucracy. But in a small construction business, a system is much simpler than that. A system is just a repeatable way of making decisions. It's the difference between guessing your prices every time and using a consistent estimating method, between hoping you have enough cash and actually knowing where you stand, between every job running differently and having a predictable process. Systems don't remove hard work. They just make hard work produce consistent results. For us, 5 areas mattered more than anything else. And while the first 3 protected our margins, the last 2 protected our time and stability. The first system we built was financial visibility. And this one was painful because for years, we were doing what most builders do. We looked at the bank account, and if there was enough money in it, we assumed things were fine. If there was a big enough balance, we felt good. If it got low, we felt nervous. But that's not really financial management. That's just emotional reaction to a number on a screen. There was one year in particular where the numbers forced us to face reality. We had our biggest revenue year since we opened the company. More jobs than ever. More crews. More activity everywhere. On paper, it looked like a huge success. But when we got to the end of the year and looked at the actual profit, we had made less money than the year before. And that's a strange feeling. You look at that big revenue number and think, how is this possible? We were busier than we've ever been. What we eventually realized was this: the growth had created a massive cash demand. We were running into more jobs at once, which meant more materials, more labor, more vendor payments, more money going out every single month. To keep up, we had taken on loans to float the work. And by the end of the year, the interest and fees from those loans had eaten up most of our profits. We had grown the company and made less money. That moment solidified one key realization: revenue is not the same as profit, and profit is not the same as cash. From that point on, we decided we needed to stop guessing. We started tracking job performance. We started looking at cash flow weekly. We built dashboards that showed us exactly what was happening inside of the business. Not months later, not at tax time, every week. And once you have real visibility, you can't unsee it. You start making different decisions. You turn down certain jobs. You slow down hiring. You build reserves. You stop using deposits as a comfort blanket. Because financial visibility isn't about becoming a CPA. It's about knowing, in plain language, 3 things every single week. 1, are we making money on the work that we're doing? 2, are we collecting cash fast enough to fund the work that we've sold? 3, is our overhead level aligned with the work that we have booked? When we started answering those questions weekly, we started acting like operators instead of firefighters. The second system was estimating discipline. Early on, we priced jobs the way a lot of builders do. We looked at what we thought it would cost, added a little cushion, and hoped it would work out. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. One of the hardest lessons we learned came early on in a new home project. We priced an HVAC system without really digging into the exact specifications that the client wanted. We reached out to a contractor during the estimating phase, got a number, plugged it into our budget. Everything seemed fine. But by the time we were ready to install that system, the original HVAC contractor had stepped away from his business because of family issues. So we had to call in a different company. My estimator spoke with them, explained the situation, and came back saying that they could match the original price. So we moved forward. The system got installed. The work was completed, and the house looked great. And then the bill came in. It was more than double what we had put in the original estimate. About $15,000 over what we expected, to be exact. We thought it had to be a mistake, but it wasn't. The installation was already done, and we had a fixed price contract with that client. They were getting exactly what we had promised from them. So there was no change order to write, no one to pass the costs along to. That $15,000 mistake came straight out of our margin. That single line item wiped out the profit on that entire job. And the lesson wasn't just about estimating. It was about communication, documentation, and purchase orders. From that point forward, we stopped relying on verbal confirmations and should be fine pricing. We started issuing purchase orders tied directly to our estimates so that everyone was locked into the same numbers. What makes the story even more ironic is that when we submitted that house for a local awards program, it won. So now there's an award sitting in our office that constantly reminds me of the spectacular work that we did for free. That's what estimating discipline is really about. It's not just winning work. It protects the business from small mistakes that turn into huge consequences. If you're a growing builder, your estimate needs two things before you sign the contract: a scope that's specific enough to price, and numbers that are confirmed enough to trust. If your estimate is built on assumptions and handshakes, you're building your profit on sand. The third system was contract structure. When we first started, we used fixed price contracts. That meant all of the risk was on us. And yes, we lost money on some jobs. But it also meant that we avoided a lot of reputational damage that comes from poorly managed cost plus contracts. Most builders who use cost plus have great intentions. They believe that if the client sees the real invoices, they'll understand why the project costs what it costs. But the reality is, most homeowners don't understand cost plus. They see higher fixed price numbers and assume that cost plus number will always be cheaper. What they're really trading is certainty for hope. And when the project ends up costing more than expected, which it often does, they feel like something went wrong. Sometimes they feel like they've been taken advantage of, even when everything was done honestly. Early on, we absorbed some of those bumps ourselves. And what that did was build trust. It built referrals. It built reputation. Over time, as we got more experienced, we moved between fixed price and cost plus, depending on the type of work. Today, we offer both. But the difference now is clarity. We're very clear with clients about what each contract means, what expectations it creates, and what kind of risk each structure carries. And I want to be clear. A business can absolutely be run on cost plus contracts. We've done it. We still do it. The key is that cost plus requires stronger communication, stronger documentation, and stronger change order management than most builders realize. Because cost plus doesn't remove the need for clarity, it increases it. Your contract isn't just a form. It's a business strategy. It decides who carries risk, how decisions get made, and how conflict gets handled when reality shows up. One more thing on contracts: scope clarity and change orders. A lot of conflict in construction isn't because someone is being unethical. It's because two people who sign the same contract imagine two very different projects. So whether you're fixed price or cost plus, you need a disciplined way of defining scope and managing changes. Even on cost plus, change orders matter. If someone tells you you don't need change orders on cost plus, you'll find that person in a courtroom soon enough. Change orders aren't just about money. They're about alignment. What changed, why it changed, how it affects the schedule, and who approved it. When we get serious about scope clarity, line by line, allowance by allowance, exclusion by exclusion, we reduce conflict dramatically. Not because surprises stop happening, but because we have a shared language for handling them. Write contracts that assume reality will change. Then build a simple, repeatable change order process that protects the relationship as much as it protects the margin. The fourth system is clearly defined operational roles. In the beginning, everything ran through us. We sold the jobs, we designed them, we managed the crews, we answered the phones, we handled the finances. And that works when you're small. But as soon as you start growing, it becomes a bottleneck. You become the estimator, the project manager, the accountant, the salesperson, and the problem solver for every job. And eventually, there are just too many decisions for one or two people to carry. Here's what the bottleneck looks like in real life. You're on a job site trying to solve a framing detail. And at the same time, you're answering a client who wants an immediate schedule update. Then your supplier calls, needing approval. Then your lead carpenter is waiting on a decision, all while your phone is buzzing with another lead. Nothing is wrong. It's just too much. So when you start documenting how things actually move through the company, who sells the job? Who estimates it? Who manages it? Who communicates with the client? Who orders materials? Who approves the change orders? Who owns quality? You have to understand who is responsible for what. And so we defined roles, we clarified responsibilities, and we built handoffs between them. But that wasn't about making things corporate. It was about reducing chaos. Because when roles aren't clear, two things happen. First, the owner becomes the default decision maker for everything. And second, employees start stepping on each other, not because they're bad, but because the work has no lanes. One of the biggest shifts for us was separating the doing the work from running the work. A builder can be excellent at the craft and still struggle to build a company if the business depends on that builder being present for every decision. When we created clearer roles, we also created clear meeting rhythm, weekly internal planning, weekly client updates, and consistent job check-ins. That rhythm did something simple but powerful. It moved problems from random emergencies into scheduled conversations. If you're trying to grow, you don't need a huge organizational chart. You need clarity. Start by writing down who owns client communication, schedule, budget, and quality. If one person owns all four, that's your next bottleneck. Next, find ways to make standard work. Builders hate that phrase because it sounds like you're trying to turn craftsmanship into a factory. But standard isn't about the craft. It's about the repeatable parts around the craft. How a job is launched, how selections are tracked, how client updates are delivered, how schedules are maintained, and how invoices get approved. The craft will always have judgment and nuance. The business should not. When we start writing down the process, what happens first, what happens next, what gets approved, what gets documented, the teams get faster and calmer. And for anyone listening who's still early in their business, the first three roles that created relief for us were not glamorous roles. They were roles that removed noise. Someone who can coordinate production details, someone who can manage client communication consistently, and someone who can keep the office side from being a constant interruption. Those roles look very different for every company, but the principles are the same. Remove the owner from the middle of every transaction. The fifth system is about creating a predictable sales and marketing pipeline. Early on, our marketing strategy was simple: answer the phone, do good work, hope the referrals keep coming. And for a while, that worked. But it also created huge emotional swings. One month, the phone would ring constantly. The next month, it would be quiet. And when it got quiet, panic would set in. We'd start lowering prices, taking on the wrong projects, saying yes to work we knew wasn't a good fit. Sales and marketing are emotional parts of the business. Even today, we still feel those emotions sometimes. It's not always as black and white as it seems when you write it down on paper. But recognizing these emotional cycles was the first step. We started tracking how many leads are coming in, where they're coming from, how many turn into contracts, and how long it took to close them. And then slowly, sales stops feeling like luck. It starts feeling like a process. We learned to separate two things that builders often confuse: marketing and reputation. Reputation is something you earn, marketing is something you can control. Early on, we told ourselves we didn't need marketing because we had referrals. But referrals alone don't create stability, they create waves. So we focused on simple, consistent visibility, clear messaging, consistent follow ups, a professional process, and a defined ideal client. Not trendy, not flashy, just steady. And we built a pipeline scorecard. How many leads came in this month? How many were qualified? How many got estimates? How many converted into contracts? And the average time to close those leads. The reasons that matters is simple. You can't improve what you don't measure, and you can't delegate what isn't defined. You don't need to become an influencer. You just need to know where your next 10 good leads are coming from and how you'll convert the right ones. Track it weekly, improve it monthly, and repeat. Quick recap before we close. The first three systems protect your margins: financial visibility, estimating discipline, and contract structure. The last two protect your time and stability: operations with clear roles and a predictable sales and marketing pipeline. If you're listening and thinking, that feels like a lot, that's normal. You don't build these in a weekend. You build them one decision at a time. But if you only start with one thing, start with visibility. Because once you can see the business clearly, you'll know which systems to build next. And just to set expectations, none of these systems are fancy. They're mostly checklists, conversations, and habits. But when you stack simple habits for long enough, the business starts to feel calmer, and the numbers start to reflect it. Most builders don't struggle because they're lazy. They struggle because their business is built on effort instead of structure. And effort has limits. The builders who last aren't the ones who work the hardest. They're the ones who build businesses that can survive them. Businesses that can run with a team. Businesses that can grow into new markets. Businesses that outlive the original owner. That's the kind of business we're trying to build. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about one of the biggest traps builders fall into as they grow: knowing the difference between profit and cash, and why scaling your business is often the riskiest thing you can do.